The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I just said, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
Okay, so we have Baron Mamiya, wildcard axe wielder, winner of the Hurley Pro Sunset Beach CT event, and the current world number one on the lineup today. I don't actually know if we've ever had a current world number one on the podcast. So, man, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a crazy last couple days. I'm just super stoked.
We're going to get into that. So this is going to launch, I think, a couple days before Portugal. You are going to be heading to Portugal. Are you still in Hawaii today? And if so, where are you at? Who are you hanging out with?
Yeah, I'm still in Hawaii right now. Obviously it was like a last minute thing to get the call up for Portugal. But yeah, I've just been kind of training, hang out with my friends here and there and just surfing and trying to get ready. And I think I leave on Friday. So I'll be there.
Right on. And how are the waves there? Did you surf today? Are you going to surf? What is it, like a day-to-day training thing look like for you? I guess sort of winter time on the North Shore.
For the last month and a half, the waves were just absolutely firing. The whole month of January, I was basically just surfing every day, all day. It was some of the best run as well I've seen ever. So, but I've just been surfing every day with my friends, and then I get my trainings in whenever the waves are kind of slow. But yeah, for the most part, I've just been surfing all the time.
Makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned it's been a crazy couple of days, but man, I think it's been kind of an insane couple of months. You finish 100th on the 2021 Challenger Series rankings. So outside the qualification for this year, you then finish runner-up to John at the Pipe QS in December, which grants you a wild card into the Billabong Pro Pipeline, where you finish 9th in the dying seconds to eventual winner Kelly Slater. Then you get a replacement spot at Sunset Beach where you win the event. You're now world number one. I think that might go down as the most radical couple of months a professional surfer has ever had career-wise.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of last year, I was just I was dealing with a lot in 2021. I had a bad injury. I was out for 5 months.
What was the injury? Walk through it.
I had a shoulder injury. So basically, I had to fix my shoulder. So I got a pretty aggressive surgery to make sure it didn't come out again.
Right.
So I was out for about 5 months, and then right when I got back in the water, it was the QS started again, and I was only back in the water a week, and then I was traveling, and I was just not fully there yet. I wasn't physically ready, and I wasn't mentally ready. There was just a lot of other stuff personally going on, and then at the end of the year, I was just like, oh, okay, well, that was kind of a write-off. I didn't do good at all in any of the events. But hey, you know what? It's all good. I had Pipe coming up. I felt a lot more ready. I was surfing a lot more. I was getting my training in, and I was back home. I was just super stoked to be back home, hanging out with my friends, going about my normal routine, sleeping in my own bed. And then the Pipe contest came up, and yeah, I was super stoked. I got second to John. It was sick to, finally get to surf a heat out there with him. I've looked up to him my whole life, obviously being from the North Shore. So yeah, I got second at Pipe, and then I was like, yeah, right on. I'm in Pipe Masters. This is sick. It's always been a dream of mine. So I got really ready for that event, and then I felt really, really good. The waves were absolutely firing for that whole month. Me and all my friends were just surfing Pipe basically every single day. I was tripping when I got into Sunset because I was oh no, I don't know how to do a turn anymore. I surfed Pipe for 4 weeks straight and getting barreled every day. But yeah, the Pipe contest went well. Or obviously I wanted to do better, but I got to surf a heat against Kelly at firing Pipe. I couldn't have asked for really anything else. But yeah, I was stoked with everything.
We've talked about actually on this podcast, there's a theory out there that Kelly had resigned himself to retiring in the heat with you because he respects you so much. It was a great heat. He was going to come in and say, you know what, Pipeline means a lot to me. I didn't get the result I wanted at this event. Baron beat me, but he's part of the new generation. It's very fitting. And then he gets that wave in the last 4 seconds. And the theory goes that he came in and he was so emotional in the post-heat interview that he kind of processed like ending his career on the spot, but he kind of had to deal with winning anyway. I don't know.
Yeah,
Did he say anything to you before, during, or after that heat?
Yeah, when we were paddling out, he kind of looked at me. He's like, dude, it's firing. Like, we're psyched. And I was kind of just like, I just want to beat you. Like, I don't care about how good the waves are. And then I was kind of like sat there and I was like, wow, like I'm in a heat with Kelly Slater at 10 to 12 foot firing pipeline. Like I was, and I looked at him, I was like, yeah, it's sick, right on. And then we kind of like, he exchanged a few where I got that good wave at the beginning. I got the 8 or whatever it was. And then, he kind of looked at me and he's like, oh, that was a good one. And I was like, oh yeah, it was pretty good. And then, yeah, we didn't really talk much after that. And then I kind of was like, okay. And then I kind of made a mistake with going on that one wave and giving him priority in the last 5 minutes. You never should give that guy any priority in the last 5 minutes of the heat, especially if he's not comboed. So, and then he got that wave and I just like, I literally couldn't believe it. Like there was, I was like sitting out there and even Leo and Kanoa are in the other heat. And we were sitting out there and it looked dead flat. And all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere. Like I was baffled. I was like, whoa, there's a wave right here. And I remember Leo, we watched Kelly get the wave. He comes out and then Leo looks at me and he's like, wow. And I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe it. It was crazy. It was crazy.
So when you come in from something like that, at that point, we didn't know about Sunset, right? So were you just like, ding dang it, that didn't work out. I guess I'm going to kind of rally and focus on like QS Challenger Series stuff for the rest of the year. Is that where your head goes after a heat like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I thought I had a pretty good like performance throughout the whole event.
For sure. Yeah.
I thought I was like stoked. I mean, I was like, hey, maybe they'll give me a wild card. Maybe they won't. It's all good. Like I understand if they don't. But I asked them for the wild card and they didn't get back to me for a while. And then they got back to me right at like 3 or 4 days before the event. And I was like, whoa, I'm in. So I started to get ready. Like I kind of was getting ready for Sunset just in case.
Right.
Right after the contest ended, I kind of took a few days off and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go try some boards at Sunset. And then when I really got in, I was like, okay, I need to go, you know, figure this out. But yeah, that was basically what happened.
Without a CT event at Sunset Beach, how often throughout a typical winter would you say that you surf out there?
I think last year I didn't even surf it once. Maybe, so
Perfect.
yeah, I mean, I try and get out there as much as possible. You know, Sunset is a very important wave. You know, especially because the CT and stuff like that. But I just like for me, it's like the crowd is just such a nightmare, and it's like there's these guys on these huge boards sitting way at the back, and you're basically sitting on the inside, like hoping they fall. So I don't really surf it that much, but when it's firing and there's not too many guys out, I'll definitely go out for a wave or two.
And you, I think as far as like elite level surfers go, and correct me if I'm wrong, you like to ride even kind of smaller boards than even other CT surfers, whether it's at Pipe or Sunset Beach. Is that fair?
Yeah, I love to ride smaller boards. Sometimes it's not the best option. But yeah, I mean, I love to like, you know, try and see how small a board you can ride with it working and stuff. So yeah, I really like to ride smaller boards.
What size board were you riding on kind of what was the biggest board you took out during the Sunset event?
The funny thing is during the Sunset event, my first heat, I rode a quad 6'4". It felt pretty good, but it wasn't like amazing. And then the same board I rode for all of Pipe was a 6'3", and it was made for Pipe. And I took it out to Sunset that afternoon and I rode it. It was and it worked really good. So I just rode the 6'3" the whole contest.
Right. And you had you've been riding Sharp Eyes for a little bit now. You had a fellow Sharp Eye team rider in Kanoa Igarashi in the final with you. How close are you with sort of other team riders from Sharp Eye that are on the CT, and how much do you guys hang out or talk about boards or compare equipment?
I mean, I'm not too close with a lot of them. I'm friends with Kanoa and then Philippe. We don't really sit down and like talk about boards or anything, but I definitely talk to Marcio about like, hey, what's Philippe riding here? Or what's Kanoa riding here? Like, these boards look really good. Like, can I get one? So I more just talk to Marcio about like what he's shaping for the other guys. But yeah, as far as like talking about boards with other riders, I don't do that too often.
Right. Now, in terms of your own competitive confidence, I love talking to elite level surfers because to a person, they acknowledge how distant, the level of surfing is even at the Challenger Series level compared to the CT, and it's the story of like, you can be this really hype surfer coming up through the ranks. And then the second you get to the CT, it's a completely different beast. The surfing is faster, it's more powerful, the competitive tactics are much sharper. Has that been your experience across these first two events, just competing against the CT class?
Yeah, for sure. Like for me, I think the QS was a lot harder for me. There's a lot of really, really, really good guys, and the waves aren't as good on the QS than as they are on the CT. So a lot of like the guys in the QS are really good at the small waves, and they're really, really, they have their game really good. I'm not that good in small waves. I grew up in Hawaii, so we don't really get small waves too often that we surf. So I felt the CT was a better fit for my surfing, just in general. Everyone on the CT is, insane. Like John, Philippe, Gabby, all of them. They're just really, really, really good. So when I like, as I was growing up, I would always watch John, and me and all my friends would always watch his clips, and we'd always try and like watch his surfing on those big waves and then try and imitate it. So I think for me, it's a little easier. It's by no means easier on the CT, but I feel more comfortable in the better waves than I do in smaller waves on the QS.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually think that's something that we've been working hard to kind of design to course correct a little bit, right? Because from the time that the CT and the QS split, which I think was 1992, it did create that space where the QS often weren't in waves that were the same quality as the CT, but you'd have surfers that were kind of like yourself, better built for that CT kind of wave than the QS, but they would have a hard time getting to the CT. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but like you may have found kind of a backdoor onto the championship tour, right? Like if you make the top 22 after Margaret River, depending on how many more events you surf, you're in. You're not only in for the back half of the season, but you've qualified for the start of the 2023 championship tour too, which would have you kind of leapfrogging over the QS and Challenger Series in a way.
Yeah. I definitely have thought about that. It's definitely crazy. Like I was so nervous going into like the Challenger Series this year. It was definitely like, I was like, okay, like I got to do it this year. Like I got to, figure it out. Like, so I started training and preparing. And then after I won Sunset, I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. Like everything just changed in like a matter of a day. Like I'm world number one and I just won the contest. Like this is like insane. Like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And it's the level thing, right? Like people talk about, they're like, well, I'm going to get really good on the regional QS. And then if I get good enough, I'm going to kind of level up and work really hard on the Challenger Series. If I get good enough, I'm on the CT. And then even once you're there, it's like, I have to get good enough to make the midseason cut. Okay, I've done that. I have to get good enough to make the top 5. Okay, I want to be in title contention. And as you pointed out, it's like, man, my whole program was focused on qualification this year. And now theoretically, I'm in the lead for the world title, or at least making the Rip Curl WSL finals. That must be a mind trip.
Yeah, I mean, like even like talking to my manager, and he's been with me since I was 14, Sean Ward. Yeah. I've been talking to him recently, and he's just like, dude, like, you could really go on a run here. Like this, like, I was like, dude, the funniest part about this whole situation is that we were worried about me qualifying this year, and now it's like I'm number one in the world. Like this is crazy. And he's like, yeah, but you gotta stay focused. I was like, yeah, 100%. This is a great opportunity, but I obviously now I have the yellow jersey. I know a lot of people are gonna gun for that, and they're gonna come after me. I have a huge target on my back, so I'm just trying to stay focused and make some heats.
I love it. One of the other interesting things that happened this year, that I'm interested to get your feedback on that too. This is my 17th year at the ASPWSL. When I started, it was still in this space where Pipe was the last event of the season, and the championship tours where the world's best surfers were, but the Hawaiian Waves still had specialists that would really, really make a run in those events. And then something happened kind of a few years into it where the CT class just got so good everywhere, whether it was J-Bay or Pipe or the Gold Coast or whatever, that the specialists at those locations had a hard time making inroads into the event, just because the class got so good. Now that we've kind of inverted the schedule and started in Hawaii, obviously we saw Moana Jones-Wong's historic victory in the women's field at Pipe, and now yours at Sunset Beach. It does feel like there's maybe an opportunity for really well-rounded Hawaiian surfers to kind of claw back a bit of space in these Hawaiian events. Is that the feeling that you've got being on the ground, or is it maybe, or I guess another perspective would be that, oh, you and Moana are kind of anomalies and that the CT class is still pretty lethal at every spot?
Yeah, I mean, for Moana, for example, I grew up with her, so I'm very close with her, and I've watched her surf Pipe the last 5 years. Going into that event, I was kind of like, okay, like she has a huge shot at winning this contest. She's surfing the wave like I've never seen any girl surf it. During the backdoor shootout, she was basically showing up some of the guys, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, you're really, really good. And I kind of knew, like, hey, if it's big Pipe and, you know, she's very comfortable out there. So I always kind of knew that she was going to be a really big threat to take out the contest. But yeah, I think the CT it's so, like, the level has just elevated. The surfing level has elevated so high that it's really, really hard. But I definitely do think now that there's a lot of young kids and a lot of young kids coming from Hawaii, and they really are, you know, pushing for that. And I think there's a huge shot for all of them to do really good in some of these events in Hawaii.
Makes a lot of sense. We're going to get into a bit of your biography here in the next segment, but before we do, I want to just get your sense of winning the Sunset Beach CT on the North Shore where you're born and raised, in front of the hometown community. You know, walk us through, you know, I guess that final day, having that opportunity, having, you know, the community behind you, and then actually coming home with the hardware. It must have been the best day of your life.
Yeah, it was the best day of my life for sure. Like, I never have felt that before in my life, and I've never won a serious contest besides like a pro junior when I was younger. So to win that and see all my like family and friends down at the beach, it was definitely a pretty like crazy emotional feeling. Like, I couldn't believe it. It was definitely one of the best days of my life by far.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's going to be the best day until the next best day, the way that you're going. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we are going to dive into just exactly where you came from. We'll be right back. All right. So you mentioned growing up on the North Shore of Oahu. Is born and raised? Is that where you're from?
Yeah, I was born and raised on the North Shore of Oahu.
What part of the North Shore did you grow up on?
So I first was living in Haleiwa,
mm-hmm.
and then as I got a little older, I think I was 9. I was basically begged my parents to move up toward like Sunset and stuff, because I was like, come on, like I want to surf. Like, I was surfing Haleiwa when I first grew up. That's where I learned how to surf, was at Haleiwa. And then once I got older, I surfed V-Land for the first time, and I was like, this is the best wave ever. Like, this is so sick. Like, I'm a Grom and I'm getting barreled at like little tiny V-Land. Like, this is sick. So I was like, begging my parents to move up there. We didn't move up there till I was around 12, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Sunset, and then I was there at Sunset for about 6 months, and then I moved to Keiki. And that's basically where I grew up my whole entire life, all the way until last year.
Yeah, it's not that far, I guess, if you've got a car, but when you're 9, you're like, it's basically like a planet away for me to go surf at the way that's not Haleiwa.
For sure. Yeah, I was definitely like begging my parents like every day. Like, my mom and dad would come home from work, and I was like, come on, let's go surf V-Land. And I got to a point where they finally were like, okay, we're moving up there. You can ride your bike down there.
And do mom and dad surf? Do you have brothers or sisters? What was the home life like?
My mom didn't really surf. My dad grew up surfing with like Uncle Mike, Uncle Derek, and all of them.
Mm.
So my dad basically taught me everything I knew. He took me out when I was 2. My brother, he kind of surfs a little, but not really. He got really
older, younger.
He's younger.
Okay.
He was younger, so he likes to go on the ocean and stuff, but he's not super big on surfing.
Right. And so growing up on that side, once you moved over there, I guess before too, I assume you went to Sunset Beach Elementary?
Yeah, that's where I went to school.
So maybe like the most concentrated like educational institution for world-class surfers in the history of humanity. Who were some of your kind of contemporaries that you went to school with?
All my friends were like, I grew up with Noah Beshin, and then Makana Pang, Kalani Rivera, Finn McGill, Wyatt McHale. All of them we all went to school together. That's where we all went, is Sunset Beach.
And how are your parents on, skipping school if the waves are good? Because we hear different versions, obviously, from different surfers. Where it's like, oh man, my mom was a teacher, I would get murdered if I tried to leave school. And then other kids are like, oh, look, the waves are good. My dad was literally taking me to surf instead.
Yeah, that's basically how I was. My dad would literally take me out of school, and then I'd get home later that night, and my mom would just be snapping at him. Like, what are you doing? You need to take him to school. You can't be skipping school to go surfing. Da, 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 da. Like, but yeah, my dad was always like, "Oh, the waves are firing. Like, let's go surf." I was like, "Yep."
And it's interesting. Some of those names you mentioned too, because this comes up a lot in the last few years for sure. But at that elite level, the surfers that get there kind of fall into a couple of camps. On the one side, there's like the surfing royalty side where it's, my dad or my mom, they were on the CT, and my grandfather's a shaper, and I was born and bred, and I had all these opportunities, and like I basically been going to trade shows since I was 5, kind of pathway. And then there's the other group who are like, I might be the first person to surf in my family, or maybe not. Maybe we just weren't that connected to the surf industry, and all that. But I had to make my own way. And obviously there's a lot of gradients in between too, but where would you kind of put yourself on that scale?
Yeah, I mean, my dad grew up surfing, but he definitely wasn't like, traveling, or, he wasn't making a career out of it. He was just doing it for fun and doing it because he loved it. So it was definitely a lot different to say to some other people, but, he definitely taught me from a very young age that you're going to have to work for everything that you have, and you're going to have to earn it. Like, no one's going to give anything to you. And he was definitely instilled that in my mind since a very young age, which was awesome for me. It gave me a lot of motivation to do what I want to do. And it definitely was a huge factor in the person I am today.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of motivation and hunger is something you see inside and outside of surfing, but just to stick with surfing, it does seem like it's a constant across the world champs, whether it's, talking about the Brazilian storm and kind of the financial hardships that a lot of those surfers had to overcome to get there, or even someone like Kelly Slater, who early on in his career was saying things like, the prize money wasn't great, but the way we looked at it is if I got through this heat, that was a couch for the apartment that we were renting, sort of thing. And I do think that is a huge driver that separates kind of the wheat from the chaff in sports, right? Where it's like, I am hungry to be here and hungry to win. Maybe compared to other people who are very, very talented, but maybe a little more comfortable, like in their place.
Yeah, for sure. Like when I was growing up, my parents really didn't have much. It was definitely like, there was some financial stress, like a lot of financial stress actually. Yeah. So it definitely, and I seen other kids, with like the nice things and things that I wanted. And I always knew like, okay, well, if I work hard enough, like I can have all these things. I just have to work hard for it. And the fact that I just love surfing so much was just a huge plus. Like all I wanted to do when I was younger is just go to the beach and surf all day. Like that was the only thing I would do. I remember I would just try and like surf as many sessions as I possibly could in one day to see like how far I could go. I remember I was like super young and I got to 7 and I was like, yeah. So
that's
like,
insane.
Yeah, like just, my dad always taught me, you're going to have to work really hard for everything you want. And, I always took that with me, and I just loved the sport of surfing. So it was a bonus.
Was there a moment for you where, I mean, you're so young still, you're 22, right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Congratulations. It's insane. But was there a moment for you, I was going to say when you were younger, but you're still so young. Was there a moment for you coming up where you thought to yourself, I want to be a professional surfer. I want this to be my career? Or was it something that you kind of always had that you just sort of kept working towards?
No, I knew from when I was like 6 years old. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, I don't care about anything else. There's no plan B. It's this or nothing. Like, I knew that, like, I just knew from a very young age, like, there's nothing else I would rather be doing. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, but I'm going to make it work somehow, you know? And that was always a huge motivation for me. Like, I never wanted to have a normal job. All I wanted to do was surf. So I sacrificed everything I ever had to just surf all day and get better. And yeah, that was all I wanted to do.
If you weren't a professional surfer, what would be the next best thing that you could be doing outside of surfing? Let's say that.
I literally, I don't know. Like, I never ever thought about it in my entire life, because I was just like, I felt like if I thought about a plan B, then that was the thing where I was like, I wasn't giving everything I had to surfing because I had a plan B in the back of my head. So I was just like, okay, there's no plan B. It's just all in 100%. So I never ever thought about it, to be honest.
It's interesting.
But when I was younger, I did like to skate. So probably be skating.
Okay. I was going to ask, was there a temptation where you're like, oh, maybe I'll do this? Okay. Yeah. You listed some very high profile figures that were your contemporaries at Sunset Beach Elementary School. In terms of growing up, you know, when it's 6 years old, you make this promise to yourself, I'm going to be a professional surfer and give this everything. Between then and your teens and I guess sort of into now, how did you rate against the other sort of North Shore kids, both in free surfing and in competition? And was there a point for you, if you weren't as good as them, where you're like, if I work on these things, I'm going to get there? Because we can say that you did, you're world number one, but I'm wondering if that was always the case. Were you always so dominant amongst your peer group?
Yeah, you know, I was definitely the most competitive person out of any of my friends, I think. I think my biggest rival when I was younger was Finn McGill. We would always go back and forth, and he was definitely a really, really good surfer, and still is, obviously. But yeah, we would just go like this all the time, and like anytime he would beat me, I would just freak out, like just be like, what? Like, how did he beat me? Da, da, da. And yeah, I think definitely when I was younger, it was definitely Finn was a big, huge push for me, big, huge factor. I always wanted to just be better than him and just beat him. That was definitely one of the people that I wanted to, like, that was my biggest rival when I was young, for sure.
There's a lot of conversation around the role of sponsorship and how that impacts a young surfer's development. You've had some pretty high profile sponsors, and you still do. Do you remember the first people that started supporting you in surfing, and how did you respond to that, the idea that someone was going to kind of financially support you as a surfer?
Yeah, I think so. I was sponsored by Rusty from 9 to 12. I don't think I was making any money from them. They're just hooking me up with gear, and then they paid for a few little trips to go to like nationals and stuff. And then my first like real contract where I made a little bit of money was from Hurley. You know, when you're a 12-year-old kid, I was making like, I think like $500 or $1,000 a month. And I was just like, so stoked. Couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, oh, I could go buy all the candy and donuts I ever wanted. But yeah, that was the first time I got a sponsor, and I was getting some money. So yeah, it was huge for me. I was super stoked. Like, my parents weren't going to be able to like afford me going to nationals and stuff if I didn't get sponsors. So when I got like a sponsor and I was making some money, it definitely took a lot of stress off them. And I was super stoked with, you know, everything Hurley did for me. So yeah, I was stoked. And then I was sponsored for Hurley till 2019. And then I signed with Ruka.
Yeah. There was no gap for you. You went straight from one to the other.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's awesome. I only bring it up because obviously there's a lot of surfers that have had that gap, specifically with the industry kind of contracting and having to kind of figure out what that next step is. So that's really impressive that you're able to go from one to the other. One of those things I was going to ask about with the development side of things too is I've seen this time and time again with, you know, either surfers coming from the North Shore or Bali or West Oz or places that have really, really high quality surf and they're awesome places to live. surfers from there sometimes have a hard time leaving, right? To travel on tour, to do the QS, to round out their approach in waves that maybe aren't kind of Hawaii or Indonesia or West Australia based. How did you deal with that when you were younger? You mentioned going to nationals, which would have been a different experience, but were you always into it, and maybe that in part was driven by your desire to be a professional surfer, or were there points where you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be in this place surfing these waves, I want to be home?
Yeah, I think nationals was always pretty mellow for me. Like I never really cared too much because there's no waves at home. I think the first serious time where I was like, oh, okay, this is like heavy, like I want to be home, was the first year I did the QS. I did good in the first event. I got second at Meriwether, and then I lost every heat.
I remember this.
Every contest. And I remember that year I was just like, dude, this is heavy. Like, I just want to be home. Like, I don't even care about, like, I was just like, bro, I just want to be home. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to walk down the beach at, like, Keiki and just look down and be like, wow, this place is beautiful. Because growing up on the North Shore, it is, like, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like, it's my favorite place I've ever been to. And it's very hard to leave when you grow up in Hawaii. But I think now, for me, I'm definitely more like, when I'm on the road, I kind of have my program. You know, I got like, you know, a nice group around me. Like, I have my girlfriend coming with me, and then my filmer, who's a good friend of mine. And then I got my manager, Sean. So now it's a lot better. I think before I was just so grommed out, and I was just like, this sucks. Like, why is this, like, why am I here? Da, da, da. But now it's like I get to enjoy. Like, I feel like before I wasn't enjoying the places I was. I was just like, oh, I just want to be home. Like, this sucks. But now I think I'm definitely, like, you know, a lot more appreciative of where I am, and I'm having a lot better of a time for sure.
And you mentioned earlier, like, how good the waves are on the North Shore. Were you one of those North Shore kids that was much, much more comfortable out at, like, you know, 8-foot pipe than you were kind of competing, than you were at like a 2-foot beach break? And is that something you had to intentionally work on in your own surfing?
Yeah, I was way more comfortable at pipe than any wave in the world. I still am, for sure. Like, I've given everything I ever had to that wave. I surfed that wave, rain or shine, when it's too big or too small, or surf that wave as much as I possibly can. So I feel like I've definitely, you know, in the most comfortable at that wave than any wave in the world. I knew small waves were going to be an issue for me. That's just basically how it is for any kid from Hawaii. So a couple summers I would go and stay with my manager, Sean, and we would just, he lives in Huntington, so we would just go surf Huntington. I would just surf there all summer, just work on boards, you know, just try and get better, figure out how to create speed on small waves like that, and just do stuff like that just to get better in small waves. And then it definitely paid off when I went to the QS, and it was, you know, the waves were small and shitty, and I was just like, hey, this is what Huntington's like. I put a lot of time in, so let's see how my skills go to everyone else.
Makes a ton of sense. And even the way that you describe pipe, I think it's pretty reminiscent of even, I think, how Kelly talked about after his win there, where he said, you know, I've given my life to this wave. And it's something that I've come to realize pretty recently. Like, I got 8-year-old twins, and they got into rock climbing and got me into rock climbing. So I've been like binging all this rock climbing content. Yeah. And I was saying to a few people, I said, man, Pipeline is surfing's El Capitan, like in rock climbing sort of parlance. Like Tommy Caldwell or Alex Honnold, all these people, they say the same exact thing. They're like, I've dedicated, you know, decades or my whole life to just this wall, you know, and you hear that same kind of reverence in people talking about pipe. And as good as you are out there, that easily could have been your career path. You know, you could have just been like, I'm gonna dedicate my life to this wave, and you probably could have still had. I mean, you could have had a really successful career just doing that, but it sounds like you've always been driven to want more.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever went out to pipe, I was 9, and my uncle Derek Ho took me out, and, you know, he basically pushed me to my first wave out there. I can remember clear as day. I took off, and my front foot slipped, and I just cartwheeled down the face, completely pounded, like freaking out. And then he's like, "It's fine, just in the next one, you gotta just, you know, make it." And I was like, okay. Next one, I took off, went down the line. I went backdoor the first time. He pushed me, and it was small little right, and I got barreled, and I came out, and I was just ecstatic, couldn't believe it. And ever since then, I was like, oh my God, this is my wave. I love this wave. Like, this is like, I'm going to surf this wave every day. Me and all my friends would go out when it was small. We'd sit on Ains. We'd surf backdoor. We'd surf pipe. We just would just love to surf out there when it was small and get all these little backdoor waves and stuff. So yeah, I loved it. It was everything I ever like dreamed of, just getting barreled at pipe. And then as I got older, I started surfing it when it was bigger and stuff. So, and it was really fun, but I definitely, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, like I love this wave and I love pipeline, and this is like the wave, my favorite wave in the world, but I want to be like at the top of, like, I want to surf against the best guys in the world at every single good wave in the world, and, you know, see what I can do against all the best guys in the world at the best waves in the world.
It does seem like something that maybe like John's someone who ushered it in a little bit, because going back to what we were saying about the pipe specialists earlier, there weren't a lot of them, like 80s, 90s, especially early aughties as well, that could take all that experience out at pipe and then say, I'm going to apply that to Huntington Beach or wherever, Lower Trussels, et cetera, et cetera. It was sort of a one-way thing. Whereas I think John, through his talent, and also I just think he would be the first to say, is like, I've learned a lot just about the way water moves surfing at pipe. And I've tried to take that and to your point, like work on how that works at Huntington Beach or work on how that works in a lot of other places. To me, it feels like that's an easier transition than the other way around. Like if you grew up in Huntington Beach, having to then go, okay, I kind of know how water moves out at Huntington Beach. Now I got to go figure it out at pipe. It feels like that's a bigger mountain to climb than the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like growing up on Hawaii, you start to realize a lot about the ocean. Your ocean IQ is sky high. You know, I've seen like my best friends that all know how, you know, the ocean works and how this and the currents here and the waves break here and this and that. And you learn that very quickly at a very young age when you're surfing there all day. Growing up in Huntington, I'm assuming the waves are a lot smaller. You know, you don't get that raw power as you do in Hawaii. So yeah, I mean, growing up in Huntington and then coming to Hawaii is definitely a huge difference than growing up in Hawaii and then going to Huntington, because you already kind of have an ocean IQ and you kind of can see where the waves, you know, what happens if this happens, and then you can do that, and then, you know, vice versa. But you don't get to see that much in a lot of different places where the waves are smaller. So yeah, growing up in Hawaii is a huge advantage. And if you can apply that to everywhere else in the world, you're very stoked.
Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned having to spend a lot of time recovering from an injury. I think you said it was last year. For so many surfers, and I kind of go back to, I think when Mick Fanning ripped his hamstring off the bone in Indonesia, I want to say it's 2004 maybe. Like most surfers are kind of naturally fit just because of how much you exercise just going through the motions out in the water. But so few of them up until that point really took their fitness seriously. And even after the fact, a lot of them have to kind of get injured to understand like, oh man, there's things about my body that I never really thought about. And now that I have, I came back like, 10 times stronger, not only because I rehabbed the injury, but I worked on all these other things and I understand my diet better and my flexibility. Was that your experience with your injury as well? Or have you always kind of been body focused?
I was never like I never ate like the best,
we talked about the candy. Like I'm a fellow traveler, man. I think the same thing. I'd be like, great, ice cream, candy, we're on.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't until I started working with Sean where he was like, dude, you're not just gonna sit here and eat a gallon of ice cream every day. Like that's just that's not gonna happen. You want to be a world-class athlete. That is not, that's not it right there. So I just slowly started work on my diet, and then he got me into training. And then, since I was like 15, 16, I started to get serious into training. And then, after I got hurt, I was definitely more like, okay, like now I got to take it a lot more serious, because as a surfer, all you want to do is surf. Like you just want to surf. And then when you're like, okay, I want to surf at the highest level and be on the world tour, and I'm on the tour and I want to do this, then it's like, okay, well, you're not going out there and you're not going to go and surf 150% every time you step in the water. That's going to lead to injuries. Your body's going to be destroyed. Like, it's just not a good idea. So that's when I was like, okay, well, now I got to, like, you know, kind of pick my sessions when I'm like, okay, this, and then like, okay, let's push, or let's just like go out and, you know, go through the motions and do this. But I definitely got super into training, and I was always like, okay, the more I train, like the more I do good training, the more it'll help me prevent injuries. And I think that when I got hurt, I was kind of like, okay, well, now I got to take this really seriously, because, you know, you get hurt and you get surgery, like your body's like your shoulder, like whatever it is that you hurt, your knee, your shoulder, your ankle, anything, it's never going to be the same again. So you have to take that really seriously and, you know, do all the proper things so that it feels really good.
Yeah. The restraint comment's interesting, because I actually feel like that's completely inverted, you know, in the last 20 years. Whereas, you know, when I started, surfers would kind of restrain themselves in heats and safety surf and try to get the scores that got them to the next round. And then you'd see this really electrifying surfing in the free surfing space. And then I guess you could kind of credit the judges with this. They don't get credit for anything, so we should give them a little bit. But the way they've kind of interpreted the criteria has encouraged and incentivized like the world's best surfing happening in the live arena, to the point where I've heard sort of photographers kind of bemoan the fact like, well, I'd go surf that person free surfing, but they pull all their punches when they're free surfing because they don't want to get hurt. You know, the time that they let it loose is in the heats because so much is on the line and they get rewarded. You're someone, and I want to get to this in a second, who is not only world number one, but he's put out awesome free surfing edits. How have you kind of balanced that to surf so well on camera, but then also save your body for, you know, the stakes of competition?
Yeah, I mean, the last couple, like this winter, for example, I didn't think I was going to be surfing a serious contest until around May when the Challenger Series started. So I was kind of like, hey, you know what? Like, let's just go surf. Like, I just want to surf. Like, that's all I wanted to do. And I was like, hey, I wasn't trying to surf as hard as I possibly could, but I definitely was like, hey, if a section presents itself, I'm going to go launch or do whatever I wanted. But I think now it's a lot different. I don't want to get hurt right now because that would suck. But yeah, it's like when I was younger, I didn't care. Like, I was just like, hey, I'll just do whatever, surf 100% all the time. Just go out there and just give it my all. But now I'm definitely like, hey, like, you know, just mellow out. Like, yeah, I'm just kind of focusing on saving everything for a heat, because that's when it matters the most, I think.
You mentioned a couple of the entities that had supported you up until this point. You're now writing for RVCA. I think you're probably their only representative in the CT events at the moment. It's a wild guess. But, you know, longstanding company that has had CT surfers on before. Seems like a great fit for you, right? Since their entire identity is balance of opposites, and having representation at this elite level seems like an important thing. But also, you've been writing Sharp Eye Surfboards, as we talked about, for a little bit now. They have a huge track record in recent years of elite level success. It feels like you've landed in a really good place just in terms of the companies that you're representing at this level.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super stoked to be with RVCA. I think this is my third year with them. So yeah, I'm super stoked. And then, yeah, Sharp Eye has been huge for me. Marcio, when we met with each other and stuff, he was like, hey, I really want to get my boards, you know, solidified as some of the best boards in the world. You know, I feel like people don't think that my boards are good in Hawaii or in the barrel or in bigger waves. And I said, yeah, well, let's do it. If you want that, I can do that. I can help you with that. And, you know, really worked super closely, and we worked on some pipe boards. And then, yeah, you know, I think after everything that happened, I think now it, you know, proves that he is one of the best shapers, you know, in the world right now. And his boards work good anywhere in any waves. So, you know, I'm super stoked to be on his team, and, you know, it's been amazing.
And he's also one of those shapers that it feels like surfers are more open to experimenting a little bit in terms of equipment. I mean, Felipe Toledo was surfing like a vacuum bag, Dark Arts, carbon constructed swallowtail quad out at the Rip Curl WSL finals last year and looked amazing. You mentioned to bringing a quad out at Sunset Beach. How flexible are you when it comes to different materials or different shapes in competition? Or are you someone that's like, I have a very specific set of boards that I continue to refine and I stick to these as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very flexible when it comes to that stuff. Like, people get freaked out on quads and this and that, and, oh, you're riding this. Like, I just, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if you're going to go out in your heat and you're worried about your board, you've already lost the heat. Like, it's done. Like, just go pack your bags and go home. Like, for me, it doesn't matter really what board I'm on. I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting 2 good waves and surfing them. Like, if my board is not amazing, whatever. My board is not amazing. There's nothing I can't, like, it's out of my control. The heat's already on, you know? So obviously I do everything I can to have good boards on my feet and like I'm, you know, confident in the heat. But when it comes down to like, hey, like this board actually worked really good and it's a quad and I'm going to go out and ride it, then that's when I'm like, yeah, like the board worked good. People are going to be like, oh, that's this, that. Everyone has their own opinion on, you know, their stuff. But if you're confident on what you're on, then that's fine. I actually got to that board that Philippe rode in the final. I got that same exact board, Dark Arts, 4-fin, everything, same fins, everything. And that was the best board I ever rode. So I was like, okay, well, this board is legit. Like, so I made a 6'4" version of it. And that's what I was riding at Sunset. It's the same exact board he was riding, just a 6'4".
Right.
It was really good. I definitely wasn't really super used to it. So after the heat, I tried a few more boards and then I was like, okay, I'm going to ride the 6'3". But yeah, I mean, I'm not like going to get too in my head about like this board, that, this board, this, because then that's when you just start second guessing yourself and you've already basically lost the heat. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. Obviously I want really good boards on my feet, but I'm not going to like, it's not going to like make me freak out on it or anything.
Makes sense. We got a couple more topics and our listener questions for you, but we're going to take one more break to get a word in from our sponsors and we'll be right back. So we mentioned it in the upfront, but first off, I say congrats, but it was really like very well deserved getting a spot at the Mayo Pro Portugal, which will be the 3rd stop on the 2022 Championship Tour. I don't know how the WSL would have explained not having the world number 1 in the event, but we would have had to figure something out. So congrats, and you must be pretty hyped to get over to Portugal.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. I surfed Super Tubos when they had the Challenger Series over there, and the wave was insane. So I can't wait to surf it with only one other person out.
That's good. I was going to ask you, because I know you competed at the EDP Billabong Pro Ericeira, which is a radically different wave to Super Tubos, right? It's kind of a slopey, bells kind of like point break. Haven't had probably the competitive success you've wanted there, but you have been out to Super Tubos before, even if it was in sort of the chaos of a free surf with bodyboarders and surfers kind of going everywhere.
Yeah, it was, the waves were absolutely fire. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wow, this looks like back home. This is insane. But yeah, it was really, really crowded. But you know, everywhere's crowded, and when you come to someone's home, they're gonna, you know, take waves off you, which was fine. But just to be there and see the waves, it was insane. So I can't wait to be out there in the heat. It's gonna be sick.
I'm excited that we're going there in what at least we've been told is sort of the primary season for that spot. Like, because in the past we've gone there. I've been fortunate enough to go there a bunch. We've had really good days and really good events. I think the year Adriana won, we ran the whole thing in like 3 days, and it was just like sun up to sundown, just firing offshore, really good waves. But in this window, it's meant to be like big on swell, great on winds, and kind of proper Super Tubos. The locals there love to say it's like the Portuguese pipeline. You can comment on how accurate that is or not. But the question I was going to have too is, because there are similarities of it's like a very, very hollow kind of a wave, is your quiver essentially the same between, you know, the Billabong Pipeline Pro and the Mayo Pro Portugal?
Yeah, like definitely my boards are very similar. they're definitely a little smaller just because it's a beach break and it's not on a reef, and it's kind of, a little different. You got to come out and do turns, airs, whatever. But yeah, like if it's pumping when I seen it, I would definitely be on something very similar to what I'd be on at Pipe for sure.
Right. And we talked a little bit about this and, your future for the last two events after Portugal on the championship tour before the midseason cutoff at Bells Beach and Margaret Rivers. I think undecided at this point, might be decided by the time this rolls out. But
Yeah.
in the event that something strange happens and you don't make that top 22 after Margaret River, is your plan to suit up and do the Challenger Series starting at Snapper Rocks?
Yeah, for sure. I think, if something happens and I don't make the top 22, I definitely will be going to the Challenger Series, and yeah, fighting for a spot on tour.
So we got the uncomfortable question out of the way. We'll have the fun one now. The back half of the tour that, again, regardless of what happens in Australia, if you make the top 22, you are guaranteed to surf at Garajagan, Punta Roca, Saquarema, Jeffreys Bay, Chopu, and depending on how you finish, potentially for a world title at the Rip Curl WSL Finals at Lower Trestles in September. Out of those back half events, which ones would you be most excited to compete in?
Tahiti, number one. I've gone there since I was like 14 or 15 years old every year. One of my best friends, Matahi Jolet, lives there. So he stays with me every year. So I'm really good friends with him. I love that wave. Chopes is insane. And then obviously G-Land is definitely up there. I want to surf that wave. It's always been on my bucket list for sure. So yeah, those two are my favorite. And then obviously J-Bay and stuff like that. So, but yeah, those two are my up there for sure.
You mentioned talking to Sean Ward just about the headspace adjustment you've had to make the last couple of days, really. But it is one of those things. I always think about this comment that Andy made, back when he was on tour, and he said something to the effect of, everyone wants you to win your first world title, and as soon as you do, the target's on your back. Have you, I know it's been fresh, but there's such a different psychology to chasing the front runner compared to being the front runner. Is that something that you work on with a coach, whether it's Sean or sort of like just a sports psych coach or anything like that, now that you're in this position?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with sports psychologists and stuff before, but, I think at the end of the day, I've prepared for this my entire life, and I feel that, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And whatever, at the end of the day, like, yeah, I do have the Jeep yellow jersey going into Portugal, and obviously everyone's going to be gunning at me and they're going to want to take it from me. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go out and focus on myself and do whatever I have to do to win. And at the end of the day, whatever happens is going to happen.
I feel like we're a long way away from a tour where people are kind of calling each other out publicly, or there's kind of battles. I think there's so much mutual respect for everybody at that level. But I will ask, have you felt any kind of difference in your interactions with other CT surfers after your win at Sunset Beach? Has there been any kind of different attitude or conversation that's taken place, or is it more of the same?
No, I think everyone is on their own program and stuff. I wouldn't say I had any hate from anyone. If anything, it's been, congratulations and stuff like that. I think we're in such a humbling sport where, it's not like fighting where I can just step in the ring and be like, I'm going to destroy this guy's head. It's not like that at all. You get very humbled by the ocean. We're dealing with Mother Nature, and Mother Nature is, the most powerful thing on this earth. So when you start talking, shit about someone else, like at the end of the day, you're going to get humbled. It could be in this event, it could be in that event, could get hurt, anything can happen, So I think, everyone's at a pretty, mutual respect. There's probably been stuff said to other people, but for the most part, I think we're in a very, it's a very humbling sport that we're in, and, anything can happen when you're dealing with Mother Nature.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's been one of my pet projects in a lot of these conversations is I think you're totally right. Like, I think the ocean is sort of, it tamps down on arrogance really a lot of ways, like, because you are competing in the most dynamic field of play probably in all of sports, and to the point where, as you pointed out, like, you could train your ass off. You know, you could be the biggest, baddest person to step into an octagon, and you know you can beat that person, you know? And it's like, you do the same thing in surfing, and you're like, oh, we'll see what happens. Like the ocean's still in charge. And I think that's a really cool thing about surfing, actually, because it's so unique in all the sports.
Yeah, for sure. Like me and my friend Noah would talk about it all the time. We'd be like, dude, how sick would that be if you just, you know, just started just like fucking saying shit to people, you know, just going at it. I was like, yeah, that would be sick. But like, what happens when you go out and you just get smoked in front of the world because you're just saying all this stuff, you know? I mean, I think it would be sick, you know, to just do that stuff, and it'd bring a lot of light to the sport and it'd create, you know, a story and drama and whatnot. But I think all the surfers know, like, hey, like, you know, we're in a sport where we're dealing with not only like ourselves and our ability, but we're dealing with Mother Nature. So it's kind of hard to just do that. And, you know, people will handle losses a lot harder if they were to do that.
There is a middle ground, though. I think I get what you're saying, you know, but I think there's a middle ground where, and I think this is something that Andy really unlocked too. And it was less that he was like talking shit and more that Andy was like, I'm here to win, you know, in a sport that, you know, a lot of times people are just kind of go along to get along. They're like, oh, I'm in Stoke, someone's paying me to surf and I get to travel around and whatever, you know, and I think people kind of bristled against that. It's certainly not as interesting compared to people nowadays who are like, yeah, of course, I compete. I'm here to win. And I know that if I work my hardest, I give myself the best shot.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'd do anything to win at this point. You know, that's why we do it. And I'm not here to lose, that's for sure. And I'm sure people don't think I deserve to be here, but I feel like in my mind I do. And I think I'll do whatever it takes to win. And I think Andy did that.
Totally. I don't know. I don't know if people don't think you deserve to be here. If they don't, I certainly haven't heard it, and I hear a lot of things, but Jesus, man, I just think your performances, everyone's just like, holy shit, this guy is legit. And I think that's part of it, right? Because the surfing industrial complex and the media hype machine can say all they want about whoever, but if that person can't do it in the live arena against the world's best, it doesn't mean much. And you've done that, you know? So I think people are just like, he's here. I do want to bring up Snap 4. Logan Dulian is a very good friend of mine. I ride hard for Snapped, I always have ever since it came out with the first videos. And my understanding is that in Snap 4, your segment is amazing. So for all the listeners who haven't seen it already, go check it out immediately. But your segment won the voting. You won Snap 4, but lost on a technicality.
Yeah, Bobby, Mick, and Taj all picked me.
Unanimous.
Yeah. And I kind of was like, well, yeah, I won. But before winning, I knew that I wasn't going to be eligible for the money. So a lot of people were like, whoa, why didn't Logan give it to him? But we had a sit-down conversation. We all talked about it. But yeah, I won, and couldn't believe it. I was so stoked. I couldn't believe my section 1 because I just didn't think he was going to win. I thought Jack was going to have some crazy part.
He did.
Which he did.
Yours was
which
radical.
he did. Yeah. Which he did. But yeah, I was just super stoked to win.
Maybe the universe decided, you know what, this kid's got a lot happening in the next few months. We'll just kind of pull this one out from him just for a second, because that would have just added on to oh, and you won Snap 4 in 3 months. That's insane.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's funny looking back. It's funny seeing what happened back then and to be like, wow, I was so bummed I can't believe I didn't get the money or whatever. Whatnot. And then now what's happening, I was like, okay, well, everything happens for a reason, you know, and you just got to wait and see what happens.
Makes sense. Well, I appreciate it. We every episode we put a feeler out to the listeners that follow us on social media at the Lineup Pod for questions, and you were far and away. We've had the most questions coming for you. We had to spend hours going through them and whittling them down. We've whittled them down to 3. The first question is from @Kurt_P5, who asks, "What is your favorite workout when you're not surfing?"
My favorite workout is definitely yoga. It's my favorite.
How long have you been doing yoga for?
I got into it, like super heavy into it when I was during 2020. I was just sitting at home during quarantine and was like, oh, let's get into yoga. I have nothing else to do. So I got super into it. Body was feeling great. Surfing like a lot better. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do. And then now I've gone to strength training and stuff like that. But yoga is one of my favorites for sure.
Great answer. Second question is from @Tonita Surfs, who asks, what's the impact of growing up with a squad on the North Shore? I guess they probably mean compared to just kind of doing it on your own. Like, what was the impact for you growing up with a little unit around you that surfs so well?
Yeah, it was so like motivating, and each of us were just pushed by each other. Like someone got like a sick air, crazy wave. You know, you just like, oh, that's sick, but okay, now I want to get something, you know, bigger or better. And you know, it just pushed us so hard. It was amazing. Like if I did it by myself, I wouldn't have pushed myself as hard, I don't think.
Makes sense. And the last question of the three that we picked is from @Meeg_Christine, who asks, what is your favorite spot to eat in Hawaii?
Pupukea Grill, for sure.
Definitive answer. I like it.
Yeah.
What's your go-to at Pupukea Grill?
Show you chicken plate with tossed greens. So
all right. I love it. Well, maybe we're going to finish up. You can get it pretty quick. Yeah. We've got one final segment. This is the lightning round. So we've got 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can. First question. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Last book you read?
Relentless.
Best surf film ever?
Snap 4.
One wave you never have to go back to?
I have no idea. Manly.
If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life?
Pipeline.
Best person to share a lineup with?
My friends.
Worst person to share a lineup with?
I don't know. Kelly Slater. No, I'm kidding. I don't know, honestly.
That's all right. That's fine. Last one. Finish the sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Wait, can you repeat it? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Finish the sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Winning.
Love it. It's probably going to happen pretty quick. Barron Mamiya, thank you so much for coming on the lineup, man. Congratulations for all your success. It's been mind-blowing to watch. I can't wait to see what you do in Portugal. And yeah, I look forward to catching up down the road, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm super stoked. And yeah, thank you again. This is sick.
Right on. Safe travels.